So how did we come up with this title? Well, first, Guard Perry, who I'm happy to finally shake his hand, one of our members of Theistic Science Group from Maine, I believe, said, let's do seeing the sacred in science. And then Max Blair, who's going to be talking later today, sort of a wrap-up talk about how he got interested in this thing, said, well, let's do something about the burning bush. And by that, he meant something that draws attention. Well, I had done a sermon on the burning bush. It's not a bush, it's a bramble, rubus in Latin. And a bramble, I knew immediately had to be science. And sure enough, the correspondence of a bramble is scientific truth. Now, scientific truth can mean a lot of things. The word scientific, or scientifica in the Latin, is a hard word to translate. And people have been wrestling with it all along. So let's see if I can do this here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the story and then give you a little shot of the internal sense and then a couple of numbers that proves that, yes, the heavenly doctrine teaches science. And we could debate about that. A lot of people don't think so. But I'm reminded of what Albert Einstein said, God doesn't throw dice. And you remember what Niels Bohr's response was? Who are you to tell God what he can't do? I've never found a passage that says the heavenly doctrine doesn't teach science. I will agree, the purpose of the heavenly doctrine is not about science, it's about our salvation. But science, as Ruben pointed out, has gotten in the way of our salvation. It actually says things happen without God. Impossible. So let's just read the story here. And Moses came to the mountain of God, to Horeb, and the angel of Yehovah was seen by him in a flame of fire out of the midst of the bramble. And he saw, and behold, the bramble burned with fire. And he saw, and behold, and the bramble was not at all consumed. And Moses said, I will therefore go aside and see this great vision, why the bramble is not burned. And Yehovah saw that he went aside to see. And God called to him, and out of the midst of the bramble, and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, behold me. And he said, draw not near here. Pull off thy shoes from upon thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest, this is holy ground. Now, if you look at that closely, you'll notice intelligence. You know what the word intelligence means? Reading between the lines. Intelligence, Lego is to read. And we're going to do that now. We're going to read between the lines, the internal sense. I'm not going to read that all, but I just first want to point out the angel of Yehovah is the Lord's divine human. It is the Lord Jesus Christ, a visible God. And the bramble is called scientific truth. Now that involves a lot of things, especially the letter of the word, but believe it or not, also can involve scientific truth. Notice the word truth there. The Lord isn't present in science, he's present in scientific truth. And so Moses turned aside. Why did he turn aside? It's reflection from the Lord, to turn aside, something to take us out of what the normal way we think and think about something new. That's what the heavenly doctrine does for us. It turns us aside. And notice the other thing, the exhortation, draw not near. Why? He had his shoes on. We're not meant to think from our senses. Now, how do you do science without thinking from your senses? Well, that's what theistic science is all about. Looking at science from the point of view that the Lord has given us in the heavenly doctrine. There's a lot more there I could go into, but just this is a fascinating number. How much science did Swedenborg get from the Lord? Well, this number tells us a complete idea of the creation or of the existence of all things. Existence means to come forth in their order from life, which is the Lord, is not possible on account of the arcana, which are known in heaven and have indeed been communicated to me. Yes, he learned a lot of science. Things, well, is it science? But because these arcana are full of such things which lie hidden at a higher degree in the sciences, then it cannot be described except by volumes, and then scarcely to the understanding. So he knew volumes. One volume he did give us, Divine Love and Wisdom, and then a small volume which he printed and sent out to the universities in England, the interaction between the soul and the body. And every now and then, especially in the works that he didn't publish, he drops morsels of these things that he learned from heaven. So what we have here is heaven and the Lord in the midst of it, revealing to the mind of Swedenborg all these wonderful things. And he writes a few of them. This is one thing. He says he can't describe it, but you know how what happens in the heavenly doctrine. He says he can't describe it, and then he goes ahead and describes it a little bit. Well, this is a general idea. The following, however, is a summary of them. So he's not going to describe it, can't fill volumes, but he'll give you a quick summary. And I love this summary here, especially at the very end. The Son of Heaven, in which is the Lord, is the common center of the universe. All things in the universe are circumferences beyond circumferences, even to the last. These he rules from himself alone as one continuous thing, but the intermediates he rules from the ultimates, from first to last and thence to intermediates. I don't really understand that, but that's because the Lord is the first and the last. These he perpetually animates and makes active. Look at that. As easily as a man from his understanding and will animates and makes active his body. The Lord lives in the universe. He lives in us. How does he do that? And then here's absolutely important. Influx takes place into uses and from uses into their forms. Use precedes the form. It isn't the substances that make the use. The use precedes the form. And think about that. You're going to build a house. What are you going to build it with? You have a choice of materials. The Lord made the periodic table, so he had enough materials to bring those uses into forms, but they don't come from the periodic table. So here's a number that's fascinating. It shows that, yes, indeed, the heavenly doctrine reveals science. Since sciences have shut up the understanding, therefore sciences may also open it. Here's the catch. It's a tough one. And the understanding is open so far as man is in good. They always throw that in there. It's a tough one. It makes it a lot harder. But at any rate, is he going to open the understanding with the same sciences that closed it? And it was also proved that all things in heaven constantly have their foundation in the laws of order and nature, in the world and in man, so that the foundation remains permanently fixed. And now we have two foundations. Afterward, I spoke about the foundations of truth, that they are two, one from the word and the other from nature, or from the truths of nature. Notice it's not just nature, it's the truths of nature. Now here's the first example. Look at this science here. Being promoted to honors and riches in the world are not real gains or real blessings, both for the reason that they seduce and lead away from heaven, and that they are temporary and thus nothing to eternity. Where do we find that? Do we find that in a sociology book? Do we find that in the science of religion? No. This is where we find it. In the angelic wisdom concerning divine providence. It reveals this science about wealth does not necessarily make you happy. Would the federal government figure that out? But anyway, well, actually, they take more money than they give back, so I guess they figured it out. Okay. The second example is even more interesting. Science teaches that with man there exists an internal and an external, and the internal can be elevated to God, and consequently think about God, about those things which belong to heaven, which are innumerable. Also that is able to be affected with divine things, and so be conjoined with the divine, which is eternal, and that which is conjoined with the divine is unable to die. Now, obviously, we find that in the textbooks of psychology, or do we find that in the heavenly doctrine? We find it all through the heavenly doctrine, especially in the 3rd chapter of the New Jerusalem, its heavenly doctrine about the internal and external man. Okay, this last number here. Beautiful number. This number, to me, gives us the guidance for new church science. The true order is to be wise from the Lord, that is, from his word, and then all things follows. And he is enlightened even in rational and scientific things. for it is no means forbidden to learn the sciences, since they are useful to his life and delightful. Not many students sometimes go along with that delightful part, but I think they are. Nor is he who is in faith prohibited from thinking and speaking as do the learned of the world. Now, obviously, they're not talking about thinking like an atheist. They're thinking about people who study science and see the Lord in it. But from this principle, to believe the word of the Lord, confirm the spiritual and heavenly truths by natural truths, in terms familiar to the learned world as far as possible. Thus, his starting point must be from the Lord and not from self. For the former is life, but the latter is death. And now this teaching is obviously describing which tree you're going to eat of. This is all about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. You can't eat of both of them. Remember what happened when they ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil? They were cast out of the garden. Because you cannot eat of them both. You'd like to sample both, but if you eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you can't eat of the tree of life. It's very important to always remember what the Lord teaches. So I'm going to stop here and give it over to John Clark Eccles, who's he's going to talk about psychology, the brain, the human mind, and then we'll have a break after that. Okay? Oh. Just wanted to point out, look at all those things about science there. 4 times it mentions science or the learned world in that affirmative principle. Principle, by the way, is starting point. It's where you begin that makes the difference. What's that? I have another. Oh, yeah, this is a summary. Thank you, Kurt. Kurt helped me out with this. He said, when you end, let people look over what you just said. So this is a summary. 3 key points that were made from the numbers, one from Divine Wisdom 12. Arcana which lie hidden with the sciences are known in heaven and have indeed been communicated to me, and they would fill volumes. And from the Diary of Spiritual Experience, that's sort of a compromise between how we're going to call it. Swedenborg never really named the book. Since sciences have shut up the understanding, therefore sciences may open it. New sciences, many of which are revealed in the heavenly doctrine. And finally, the true order is to be wise from the Lord, that is from his word. And then all things follows, and he is enlightened, even in rational and scientific things. So the heavenly doctrine can enlighten us to that. I think that's it. Yep, okay. Okay, clap.